right. Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Krejci Shaw, and this is Qualitatively Speaking. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Tiffani Davis, who is not only a friend, but she's someone I consider to be family. We have for a long time, or at least I have, she'll laugh when she hears this, I have for a long time wanted to talk about what it has been like to grow up in or on the west coast of Canada, and what it has been like to have a blended family and to have all the experiences that we have had together in our childhood. And so 1 week ago, the whole world, I should say, saw an interview, a pretty explosive one, with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry about their experiences being sort of these senior royals, and particularly what has drawn a lot of criticism and certainly a lot of talk was the experience of Meghan Markle. And so I thought there was nobody better to talk about it with than Tiffani. And so she and I are going to do that, and I'm going to welcome her now, and I'm going to add her to the stream, unmute you. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Tiffani. I'm good. Thank you for qualitatively speaking.
No problem. It's been a long time coming.
I know. So how long have I been trying to get you on a live stream talking about us and our experiences? Has it been like 2 years?
I'd say so. In theory, I think it's been a really long time, but yeah, like since you've been really going hard with this, yeah, probably 2 years.
So thank you for your time today. I know you're a mother of 3, and so to take even an hour off to talk about or do anything for yourself it's hard. I've got 2 little ones bust in at any point in time. So I just want to give everyone watching that warning. But thank you for taking the time out, because I do feel as though this is an important discourse. I do feel as though we are very qualified to have the discussion and to explore some of these topics about race, racism, and what it means to share your Black identity, but also have a blended family and to be of mixed ancestry. And of course, to prepare for this conversation, I asked you to watch the interview with Oprah. That was 1 week ago. And I asked you to read an Elle article that was written by Meghan Markle, I think about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, about not being, defined or put in boxes. And so maybe that's a really great starting point in which to start our conversation. But ultimately, what I will ask you this. First of all, can you just tell people a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, me, and just maybe why this is an important conversation to you to have.
Yeah, so I've lived the vast majority of my entire life on the west coast of Canada, Vancouver Island specifically, in a smaller, now booming kind of community on the water, where it's predominantly white. They do have quite a pretty large population of Indigenous, First Nation people. So, you're definitely not going like without having some other ethnicities around, but not a lot that I can really relate to. I'm not First Nation. My father's from the Caribbean, and my mother is a Gypsy, Ukrainian, Scandinavian mixture traveler in her descent. So it's different kind of environment compared to what I look like. And me and you have been friends our whole lives. Our moms were friends. So it was definitely a relationship that I know that I had to rely on for a lot more than just like your basic friendship. It was a relationship that I relied on for emotional strength and for, representation, because you had, Black people around in your family, whereas mine were far away. So I was raised with a white family. So just picking up some of the, cultural cues and, getting the opportunity to be around those that look like me as well as felt like me. Now I have 3 children, 2 daughters that are very light-skinned, mixed. So trying to, be able to go through all of the things with what's going on in the world, things that are going on near home, and then how perceptions are changing with all of these things that are coming up and topics that are coming up and discussions that are kind of having to happen, whereas before may have been pushed under the rug or held back. So a lot of thinking and talking and trying to keep everyone prepared for what could happen, what has happened, and going forward.
So thank you for that. And thank you again for being with me and talking about this. So I feel like we're going to have a chance to talk about our own families and our own upbringings as we sort of like this interview that Oprah did with Meghan Markle and Prince Henry. So the first thing I'll ask in regard to that is what was like. So first of all, do you want to give like a quick sort of overview of how you viewed the interview itself, like what it was like to see her explain her experience, and not to maybe mix that so much with the response, but what was your first like sort of reaction to what, to her persona? Did you find her to be authentic? Did you find that there was something missing? What were your first thoughts?
I think overall I was impressed with both the interview and Meghan. I thought that she carried herself very well. She spoke very eloquently. She, didn't seem to be overran with emotion or anything like that. So I definitely feel like she was pretty authentic. As far as like topics that they discussed, I thought some of it was really important. Like I really appreciated all of the things that she said about like mental health and like being so raw and honest about what she was going through. Some of the questions I felt were kind of hokey and definitely for ratings, but I mean, you have to expect that, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got my crying baby going now. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, overall, I think it was your pretty standard Oprah interview. So I think that she did a good job with letting people in and understanding, what she went through. I think that I don't know. I mean, again, it depends on what you're looking for in the interview. Like, I didn't really go into it with a whole lot of expectation. I didn't watch it like when everybody else did. I watched it later, so I kind of heard a few things. So, sort of kind of knew what to expect to some degree. As far as the things that she said and, being shocked or surprised, nothing was all that shocking. I was shocked, I guess, to hear her say that, she felt suicidal and it really at one point just didn't feel like she could go on. That was surprising. Yeah, I mean, it was overall, I think she did a pretty good job. And I definitely can understand why she would want to leave and pull herself out of that situation. It's pretty sad, when they're talking about the kids and not being able to get the titles and that kind of thing. Because I think she hit the nail on the head with that one, as far as like giving the opportunity for the world to have representation when it came to the royal family, and now that's been taken away. So it's a sad realization to a very real problem that is everywhere.
Yeah. So my sense was I also thought that she came off as very authentic, but as I was watching it first sort of occurred to me that the terminology that she even uses like to describe herself is I found to be like very general, like of color. And I've heard her say that before, but I suppose I didn't really think that was sort of the entire way in which she describes herself and her ancestry. And so I was kind of waiting for her to say, like, as a Black woman or as a woman of African descent, as a child of a Black woman. And, but there was none of that. And so that's actually what led me to the Elle article, because I was like, well, let me kind of find out more about how she views herself and then how she also sort of articulates her identity. And I wonder, and so I don't know if this occurred to you, but as I was watching the interview, and there's this point where she talks about this moment where she pretty much let her husband know that there's like a major mental health issue happening with her. And when they showed the images, she was pregnant with their firstborn. And I wonder too, I know that a lot of the kind of implications of racism happened after he was born with the titles and the protection. But I wonder, as somebody who, as a person who is biracial, who maybe has hesitated or been reluctant or has just simply decided not to term their identity in terms of Blackness or in terms of being of African descent, something that might be more specific. Do you have a sense that maybe there was a sense of denial and perhaps part of the psychology of it all, like that the hardship, the criticism that she was receiving just for sort of existing, it seems like, because she was just sort of living her life. She was pregnant, you know, she was holding her belly, and there was like all of this, research on, you know, comparatively between her and her sister-in-law and how unfair that coverage was. Do you think a part of the psychological, you know, break, as I think she termed it, do you think any of that had to do with maybe having to step further into racial, like her identity, her Blackness, and not being able to so much be a person of color, but that maybe there was a real intentional sort of campaign against her, maybe for her Blackness? Do you think that has anything to do with it, and maybe her realization of that? Because I thought that was possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that you just said is a possibility in adding to the stresses that caused her mental health break.
Mhm.
I think majority of people going from living a normal life, you know, I mean, not exactly normal. She grew up in LA. She is a celebrity to some extent, right? But going from, you know, that celebrity status up to the level that she went into with joining the royal family, as well as the differences in the way that like paparazzi and media are in America versus how it is over in the UK. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. And I think that, you know, I can only really speak from my experience. If I was put into something like that, I couldn't imagine what my mental health would get to. And I don't know how you wouldn't start having a bit of an identity, like start questioning your identity. Like, who am I? What do I bring? You know, where do I come from? And the strange thing I find about Meghan, and I mean, I don't follow her a whole lot or anything, you
Yeah,
know.
should I? Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan or anything, like nothing against her or anything. It's just
Yeah.
not really someone super on my radar. She seems to have these clashes and a lot of comments about like her and her father's relationship and all the turmoil that they've gone through, but I don't hear her speak about her mom very often.
Mm.
The Elle article, there's a picture of her with her mom when she's quite young, and her mom, you know, with her afro and everything like that. But even in that article, I felt like she still kind of leaned more towards like explaining the situation with her father and like where he came from and how him having a Black spouse and then them having a biracial daughter and how it was
Sure.
not in the cards for him. But she didn't really say anything about her mom
Sure.
doing the other side. So I guess it's kind of, you know, makes me wonder, like, is there a strain between her and her mom? And that's why maybe she doesn't embrace her Blackness as much. Maybe that's why there's a bit of a disconnect with that just full on Black female side of her.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know. I don't know what the distance is, but there's definitely some distance on that side. And I, you know, would love to understand more why that is.
That was awesome that you picked up on that, because I didn't pick up on that. That's something
Okay.
I didn't pick up on. But I didn't pick up on that. The fact that she was sort of explaining maybe the dad side opposed to the mom. And
Mhm.
all accounts, like her and her mom are very, very close. Like her mom was in the UK after she was born. She's very close with her mom.
Right. She just doesn't put it out there a lot, from what I can see.
Yeah. Now to balance it out, now it's interesting because, well, what is interesting too is that if you're talking about, I remember her talking about the father, like we were talking about the love of the relationship, sort of an odd thing between from her father's perspective or from maybe his or the other side's perspective, but then not really talking about how maybe peculiar and sort of unexpected it was for her mom. Like it wasn't something that perhaps took adjusting for her to, to fall in love with someone who perhaps she never thought she would fall in love with. So that's really, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so on the topic of like racial ambiguity, so there's they have a son, and they're going to be having a daughter soon, and so I would presume that the daughter is also going to be very fair. More than likely, she probably will not appear to have African lineage, although of course she will. I also wanted you to be, in on this conversation because, as you mentioned or prefaced earlier, you and I had different experiences too. Because, as you say, number one, we are different. We're different colors. We're different shades. But I was someone who had immediate family, Black family around me my whole life. Whereas you, I don't know if you ever felt biracial. Do you ever feel like growing up? Did you feel biracial, or did you always just feel as though you were just an African or African Canadian person? That's like my first question I want to ask.
I mean, that's a hard question to answer like quickly and easily. Did I feel biracial? Yes, because I know that that's what I am.
Yeah.
But as far as like what I felt versus what I felt I had to represent, I definitely have always carried myself as a Black woman first, because I think majority of the time, I can't really think of any time I wasn't perceived as a Black woman. Yeah. Most people that see me don't like, they're shocked to find that I have a white mom. So I definitely have always carried myself through life as, okay, like when I'm out in the world doing things, saying things, being places, I have to represent myself the way that I would want Black women represented. I've definitely always carried that on my shoulders. And that comes with pride and empowerment with it, right? I'm definitely very proud of my heritage. If somebody asks me, that fun question of like, oh, like, where are you from? Because I couldn't be from Vancouver Island.
Where are you? That's when I get, well, what are
you? Yeah, like, oh, yeah. you're a different type. Yeah. And I've gotten that question or comment from both sides, whether it be Black or white or First Nation or any different ethnicity around. So yeah, it's a fun kind of question depending on how you take it and how it's given, to give the information that I am kind of a unique mix, not just being Black and white, but being Caribbean, and then my mom's side being travelers.
So, so part of the reason I asked you that, Tiff, is because, I think that I don't know how you feel, but I feel as though, unfortunately, whether it be living in a place where you are sort of you live in a space in which there's obviously a dominant group, and you don't resemble them. So there's always, to me, when I think about like what it has come as like Black identity, you're almost feeling like Blackness as primary, right? It really, unfortunately, is the foundation of that is a lot of heartbreak. Is pointing out your difference to them. When it comes to the dominant group, you don't look like us. You're different. Like, what are you? Who are you? Where are you from? And so I asked you that question only because I know that as you mentioned, your daughters, your second oldest is certainly of some ethnicity, obviously, but you have a young baby under 1 year old, like racially ambiguous. And so I'm curious to know, like, in terms of as a mother, what do you think like you are going to have to do, or what do you perceive as being particularly part of your parenting responsibility to your children who are racially ambiguous in terms of like embracing like Black identity? Yeah, one. But I'm just curious, because I think that also kind of connects to Meghan Markle, who I think for a really long time maybe was very comfortable in this ambiguous space. And again, I say that not necessarily in judgment, because I believe everyone is on their own journey. Like, we all have to figure this out for ourselves. But I do think that there was some degree of comfort in that for her, and that maybe when she was taken out of her, that environment and put over to the UK and sort of exposed in a sense unfairly to racism and criticism, I think that maybe it became more real to her that there wasn't that space that she was in was no longer available to her. Now, you are someone who is of African descent, and perhaps some of the backlash that you're receiving could be connected to that. So just as a Black mother of two beautiful young girls who may not always be able to lead with the Blackness that they may feel, I mean, what do you think? What do you anticipate when it comes to that journey? And
So I do my best to give them information and a good sense of who they are, where they've come from, who they've come from all their sides. I was really lucky in the way that even though I was raised by a white mom, she was and still is extremely interested in culture, ethnicities, traditions and everything of the world. She, if she had the chance, she'd travel the world 4 times over, like food, hairstyles, music, all of it. And she always tried to give me as much information as she could about, my father's side of the family, who she met, who she talked to, who she could remember, where we came from, and things like that. So I think I try to kind of do the same idea with my kids, like as far as, having communication with my family now and, bringing home, family recipes and, having maps and things like that of where we've come from and, giving them pictures and videos of like, what's going on in Barbados this summer and teaching them about crop over and the different types of food. And then, grandma can make killer pierogies and cabbage rolls and stuff like that too. So It's like, we try to balance it out as much as possible. And I'm a very open and honest parent. I don't hide and shy away from controversial topics with my kids, age appropriate and stuff like that. But, it's important for them to grow up well-rounded of understanding who they are and how they came to be. So I think that my biggest concern with my girls, because they are more fair, is that they're going to experience this different type of inappropriateness and ugly language because they look more like their white side. So if people are going to perceive them just white, then it opens them up to language and judgments, not about them necessarily, but of other people of color that their friends or friends' family or whoever may not recognize as their ethnicity as well. Sure. And that is a concern because it's an uncomfortable situation to find yourself in. And it's also it's just disheartening because it's something that you can't control. And I mean, by your makeup of who you are, you have no control over it. You can't decide like, it's Black History Month, I'm going to be extra Black this month. And it's like, you can walk the walk or something, but you can't really change what you look like, So it's hard when you might not feel as strongly ethnically connected to what you look like, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense. Yep. So it's difficult, but we just do what we can do and try to raise them strong and as individuals, but as much of their heritage they can get and understand and embrace and represent. That's my hope for them too. So
I agree with you. Thank you for that. I agree with you too. I am working very hard to be more proactive and be more open in conversations about race and color. Like for me, so on my end, so my children's father's African American. So I don't believe that they are going to have any questions, or any curiosity about sort of their African ancestry. I don't imagine that will happen. But of course, there and I've already seen it. There's already about skin color and contrast and what that means to be a brown skinned girl. And so we're having conversations, and I'll be honest, it's been hard for me. I feel, because I feel like I often feel like as a Black mother, I'm put into a position to sort of separate my child in a very separate and divisive world. But it's like that we have to have these conversations, not just Black mothers with Black children, but I mean, all parents should have these conversations about race. It's hard, but I think we have to do it. We have to be able to explain these things to our children and educate them, because it doesn't have to be such a negative thing to talk about difference. It doesn't.
That's right, and I think that exactly is, case in point right there. Regardless of what race you are or what kind of area you live in, it's a world problem. Everybody needs to understand and work together towards, easier and more optimistic days ahead. For people that, don't live in an area where there's a lot of diversity, or are someone that is not in one of these specific demographics, that doesn't mean that you should just be oblivious to what's going on and the movement and the progress that we're all trying to make. It's important for, Black people to have, white people speaking on the topic in a supportive way, because I feel like if there's something that I need to learn and it's not something that I'm directly connected to, having somebody that I'm connected to explain to me why I should be connected to it, I'm more likely to sympathize with it and want to, investigate and understand and, hopefully come to be with it. But when you don't have any connection to it, I think that's when a lot of it falls on deaf ears, and then people start rolling their eyes to it. And it's like, I'm sick of seeing it on the news. I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm tired of seeing protesters in front of, the Parliament buildings.
All lives matter.
Yeah, and exactly, the All Lives Matter stuff comes out, and then it's a, tit for tat, and the whole message is getting lost on these just silliness, So I think that the more that we make everyone understand why it's everyone's responsibility and it should involve everyone and it should matter to everyone, the easier the message will be to get across and understand.
Yeah. So, okay, so you bring up this really important part of this conversation where we're talking about, I think this really tees up this this issue of belief in one's experiences, belief that racism exists, and that to live in a colorblind world really is I mean, it sounds nice, but it's actually irresponsible. This has come up in my personal life where, and I hear this a lot on television too, where it's love is love and all lives matter and we're all in this and we're all human. Well, certainly. But there's social realities and there's structures in place that you just can't deny it at all. And so, but then we get to the point where when people share their experiences, they're absolutely, rejected. And essentially the message is, I don't believe you, or I don't want to hear it to begin with. And so you and I have talked a lot about sort of this not embracing. I always have felt like, even though we were very much in a white Canadian town, of course, and we were surrounded by all different kinds of cultures, ethnicities, people of different religious beliefs. It was actually really good to be in such a multiracial environment. But for us, we didn't have, there weren't a lot of us. There weren't a lot of Black folks around. With that being said, I think that when we grew up, there was this idea of everybody's equal and everybody's the same, and we should just sort of move on with things and get on with life and just accept everybody. But I think the harsh reality is that especially when you move beyond your hometown, I think like we did, then I mean, it hits you over the head many times that no, we can't live in a colorblind in a colorblind way. And that's irresponsible, which is why I think I have to be, and I have taken steps to be more open with my daughter about race and difference and skin color and Black pride and whatnot. I guess the point is that, are there people in your life who have tried to bring to you like this argument of being colorblind, and when you reject that idea of color blindness, I mean, is there pushback, and what kind of pushback have you received?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of excuse cop out came out quite a while ago of, oh, I don't see color. Like, I'm so not racist that I don't see color. And it's like, I think for some people the meaning is good. Sorry, my baby's like losing it. But yeah, it's important for everyone to be seen, and everything about you should be seen. I mean, what we look like is important, as far as like understanding who we are. Our clothes and jewelry and makeup and stuff like that is representation of how we feel and how we like to showcase what we like and stuff, right? So the same way that, you can tell somebody like, oh, I love your t-shirt, you should be able to say and acknowledge that you love their traditional, whether it's a bindi or, a piece of clothing or, the complexion of their skin. Like, there's beauty in the uniqueness and the difference. And I think that maybe somewhere that's gotten muddled and lost in the idea of like, well, is it okay to say that, or is that racist? Like, if you're telling someone that the complexion of their skin is beautiful, I would think that no one's going to take that as like a racist or racially charged comment.
Microaggression or something.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, everything has to be coming from a good place. And I think that's where some people might get scared off, or things get misinterpreted because, not everyone's great at socializing and things like that, right? But yeah, as far as, people saying it to me, I just kind of laughed at it as like this awkward, like, you think what you're doing is beneficial, but it's actually like going backwards.
Yeah.
Like, it's not beneficial to say things like, I don't see color, because now you're just erasing my identity.
Yeah. And not only that, there's a word that like in research that that I use a lot, and it's called like your ethnography, your ethnographic journey, which is not just your journey culturally, but it's also the journey of everybody before you. How do you feel when you advocate for history and you advocate for knowledge, for expanding knowledge? How do you feel when, or maybe this is a better question, what are some of the responses that you get when you discuss history or when you discuss things that are intergenerational in nature? What kind of pushback do you receive? And then also, is there one or even more than one comment that you received that you thought was really positive and welcoming and sort of loving in a sense? Like, can you give two examples of situations where you've been in, where you advocate for, people that consent, the struggle, and responses that you've gotten on both sides of that, positive and
negative? Yeah, so I mean, for the pushback, you hear a lot about, if you're speaking about like colonization and how things came to be, and I mean, especially here on Vancouver Island, we learn a fair amount of Indigenous history because it's extremely relevant to our area. And, you used to hear a lot of people say things like, well, that's just how it was back then, like somebody had to come in and civilize and put civilization in this place.
Yeah.
And my response to that was always, but who asked you?
Yeah.
There was people here, they were fine. These settlers came in, brought disease and famine and all of these problems. A lot of their people that were natural to this area died. And now it's, it is what it is now, but who knows if that was what it was supposed to be like here, really.
Yeah.
So it's hard, you know, because you are trying to help the situation and improve, but that's not always how it's going to be received. And
Yeah.
then some of the positive is, you know, it's always nice when somebody says something like they know information that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like just one that kind of pops to my mind that makes me giggle is a guy that I went to school with for forever, like from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, who was, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes, skateboarder, you know. We were in socials class, I think, in grade 8, and his socials project he did was that he recited Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, like start to finish, the whole thing. And like this was from somebody that I never would have expected to know that speech, you know, maybe know the person, but even, you know, even that in this area, not a lot of people know, you
Yeah.
know, about the civil rights movement and things like that, right? So, you know, it's definitely out there, and you know, it's very much appreciated, you know, when you get the positive. I think
Yeah.
right now it's just a lot of uncertainty, and people are maybe some types of people are feeling overwhelmed because it is everywhere now. You know,
Yeah.
this is something that me and you, I mean, like we started doing the walk away from racism at like 12 and 13 years old or something like that, right? And I mean, there was like 4 or 5 of us out there in the rain. So, you know, we've been doing this for a really long time, but for other people, it's new and scary, and they're not quite sure what to think of it. And, you know, maybe they come from a different time where it wasn't quite as important.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you know, our side of things is supposed to be just like hush up and deal with it,
Yeah.
where now it's like, no, like this is at a place where it's gotta go the distance. The lesson has to be learned.
Quick question. So going back to this idea of colorblindness, do you think well, based on conversations that you and I have had about like just our own personal journeys and even like our understanding, our more like deeper understanding of the struggle, like over the years, just experiences that we've had. I feel like one of the key experiences that I think was really transformational for you was having your son, was having Nephias, and what it meant to be like the mother of this black child, this black boy,
Mhm.
in a really, you know, a really white town. And so, can you maybe like offer even like a little some idea, like if you can, about sort of your identity, like black identity before his birth, and then like identity after, like the pre and post. Like how did it essentially change you, not just as a mother, but as a as a black woman of mixed ancestry?
I think I had to try to put my foot on the other side. I wasn't just representing black women anymore. Now I was having to represent black men as well, and I had to, you know, fight for, you know, their safety now because I've got a black son that, you know, it's hard when you know, watch the news and it's, you know, black children and black men being shot or
Mm-hmm.
tased to death. And, you know, the media is really hard on black males, especially. They always have been, you know, like it's always a big black man, big scary black man, you know, like that stereotype is very much still alive in the media.
Hey, Tiff,
So
do you want to look up your phone? It sounds kind of like warped. I don't know if it's the volume or the way it's positioned.
oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's better. Mm-hmm.
Better. Yeah, so it's you know, having to put on a foot, you know, a shoe for them, and advocating for them and their safety. Um, Definitely just, I guess, just made me more aware of that side of things
Yeah.
after having a son. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how else I can really describe what the difference has been.
Yeah. I think also in terms of like like, well, I had this conversation not long ago with a friend who was white, and I was talking about sort of the additional things that a Black mother has to do for their child, the things that we have to worry about in terms of what it means to take care of them, not just in terms of like their value system, not just in terms of like their physical maybe safety, but like their psychological safety. And for those who don't really understand, like, what do you feel like maybe you've had to do more of when it comes to like your son to keep him even like psychologically like safe to some degree? Because I will tell you, like, I like even thinking back to the things I had to deal with growing up, some really awful situations that forever changed me and opened up my world in really kind of negative ways, were psychologically, I think, harmful, and that had to be worked through. I mean, how do you and how have you sort of advocated for him and keeping him safe in all sort of aspects of his life?
That's I mean, I think that I'm a very, like I said, I have no problem being honest with my kids and speaking pretty bluntly. So I've had to have harsh conversations with Nephias about situations, like as a younger little boy, starting in school and things like that. It was like understanding that he has to realize that he's not viewed the same as the kids in his class that are the same size and age as him. Making him understand that unfortunately the world is going to view you harsher than the little boys that you're playing with. If you do something with another kid your age that warrants you getting in trouble, the likelihood is you're going to get in more trouble than the other kids. So explaining to him that you have to just walk more carefully. You have to try harder and be a little bit more just careful in everything, really. And that if you're trying to reach something, whether it's a job position or are you almost done? Okay. Sorry. This is like the hardest thing to try to do right now. There's no privacy in this house.
I know.
Yeah, so it's hard because you have to almost be a little rougher around the edges with them so that they don't get a shock when they're older and get into the world and see that they're perceived harsher than other people would be. So I've tried to explain why and how to be a little more charismatic and things like that. But I don't know if everybody has their own ways of doing things. That's just how I've done it so far. So
and also too, I also want to give you a chance to talk about like just like the loving support that you've had from like your mom and your brother. Like how have they made it? How do they create and how have they created a safe environment for you just to be more yourself, which includes being an African Canadian woman? How did they?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm super lucky. I have a very supportive and interested family. Like they are, I don't even know how to explain it. Like I said, my mom loves cultures and ethnicities and learning new everything, food and traditions and everything, right? So with my little brother, he grew up in a household where that's what we did. So he's the same way, he's pretty well educated on a lot of different places and, the people and things that go on there and things like that. And, with my kids having different genetic makeups and things like that too, it's just kind of all blended into this blended family that we started and have just kind of continued. And they've always been really supportive of me and my journey, you know, whether it was finding my biological father and then getting in contact with all of my siblings and, you know, finally learning and having contact with this whole other side of me, to just being interested in learning my history of like where my dad's side of the family comes from, and you know what happens in that country, and you know, like they love Rihanna. Like, you know, it's everything. It's just it's all the different parts that make up me, whether like in my different, you know, culture and stuff like that. They've embraced all of it, and it's a part of them as well. You know, like they in every sense, you know, whatever I'm talking about and learning about and telling them, they embrace it fully, and now that's just another thing that's in the family. It's just another part of, you know, who we are and how we do. So yeah.
Do you have any, is there anything you want, I know that you're busy. Do you have any questions for me? Because you said that you'd interrupt me and you haven't interrupted me yet. So if you don't, that's fine. Okay. Oh, you do?
No, I think, I mean, like I said before, like there's so much room for interpretation with like everything under the umbrella of this topic, right? So
Yeah.
I think that, like you had brought something up earlier where you were wondering, you know, with Kate versus Meghan, and the way that you were saying like how the media spun, you know, stories on either side, right? Like I remember them saying in the interview something about how like when Kate was pregnant and she was eating avocados, it was this brain inducing like super great super food, and she's such a good mom because she's eating avocados. And then when Meghan did it, she was, you know, enabling food drought and, you know, underage workers and all these other like negative spins. So you had asked something about how if it was that she was perceived different because she was a person of color or identified more as a person of color rather than a black woman, but people were spinning it as she's a black woman, you know, calling her a monster and everything else. So what's your interpretation of that type of spin on things, and the reason that you believe that happened between the two of them?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, when I was originally, what I thought was like if she had been of some other, you know, ethnic background, of some other descent, like would the criticism had been so bad? And I guess that question, I guess there's a big question mark on that, because one thing that's happened since this interview is that there's been a lot of like Black Britons who have emerged and talked about racism in the UK, and also talked about the way in which talks about, you know, racism, colonial past, how that's really treated, how it's treated very differently there than it is in the US. Here, it's just so prevalent. It's called, like, I refer to this a lot, it's called black-white binary. It's just a way of a paradigm, a way of understanding race. And there's critics of it because ultimately there's many people who feel as though if you speak in terms of black and white, it cheapens or disregards other binaries and other experiences from people from, you know, other ethnic origins. But in this case, I think that there is a black and white comparison here, specifically because she is of African descent. And I think that ultimately there seems to be a reconciliation that hasn't happened in the UK in regard to its past and you know, the Black British today, and that history. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think that there is something there, and we'll never really know whether or not, unless somebody else royal marries another brown skinned person, which probably maybe won't happen for a little while. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll take a decade or two. I don't know, but I think it's quite. I do think it's quite possible. But I do think it's also possible because I feel very strongly that, you know, people of African descent who are part of this diaspora are really fighting very hard to be believed about the hardship and the struggle. I think that that's probably the most painful part of it, is that you can share a story, you can share the story, but it's, I often say, trivialized, and that seems to be commonplace. I think this is the most recent example of that, of this idea of yes, some people accept the facts of, of structural racism and inequality, but there's a disconnect in terms of the impact on the person, on the individual, on groups. And I just, and I think also we're seeing that now. What's Meghan's problem and what's their problem? They're so privileged. They have all these resources. They're fine. And also too, there was colorism and criticism of her. She's not really Black. She's not like some people said she's not openly Black. She's she looks like something else. So I don't know. I don't think I can answer the question. That has something to do with it, because it just seems like that seems to be a common dilemma for people of African descent. Just bringing in the struggle and making it relevant today in terms of how it operates in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, media's interpretation of Black people, no matter the percentage, is mainly negative. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of positive media when it comes to Black people.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, and I don't think you're wrong. But I do think there's a separation between seeing, Black people very in a very glamorous way, and then when it gets to the serious stuff, it's like, I don't want to hear it. It's like I would rather see we see leaders like Beyonce, we see athletes like LeBron James and like Serena Williams. Mm-hmm. I would say I'm curious to know, what if Prince Harry had fallen in love with Serena Williams? I think again that colorism component, like what would she have experienced? What would she have experienced as a couple? I don't know. I feel like there's a sort of superficial element to that discussion. And ultimately, when you get a little bit more in depth, there's a rejection of that, like not wanting to get into the weeds, all the really that's where we need to be. Yeah. So looking forward. So right now, I think that we have the power and ability to positively affect like our children's lives in terms of their environment, friends, how they see themselves, hopefully to bypass some of the more traumatic events that I think you and I could talk about for like 3 hours, if we had the chance. Like, how do you, in terms of like one of your daughters is in school, the other one's going to be in school in 2 years, are there ways in which you thought about to normalize discussions about race beyond your household? Have you thought about projects or like alliances or partnerships in which to educate beyond your home?
Myself personally?
Yeah.
Well, not really. I haven't really thought about ways of getting out. I mean, I think probably the most common way that I try to advocate and educate is just through word of mouth in situations, whether it's, just a family outing and, a scenario happens, or, just out and about, I guess. I mean, like I said, I've got, our family's quite diverse, and extended family is diverse, and we live in a fairly diverse city, and there's a lot of talk about these things already. So I think the conversations are coming up a bit easier and more frequently. Mm-hmm. So I guess I feel like for the time being, that's my best way to contribute. But I mean, going forward and things like that, I definitely would like to become more active and contribute a bit more, but as far as do I have a game plan on how I'm going to do that? No, not really.
Oh, no. Yeah, no game plan. I think a part of the question is as somebody, you're a mom who's had children in the Canadian school system, so if we could have gone back in time and we could have created something for ourselves that would have, I think, added to the like the competence of like our peers, even maybe our teachers. It just sometimes in some instances, like if we could do that now, like what would that look like? Like, do you think that we need to have? I mean, I think I agree with you. I think that we had a lot of education when it came to Indigenous, like First Nations, and meant to be respectful. And I think we had a sense of them culturally as a group that was excellent. But there was really nothing for us. So what about everybody else?
Yeah.
I went to school with all different kinds of kids, you know, from all different, you know, whose parents were immigrants from all over the world. What does the education system need to do to make, I don't know, more cultural competency part of staple, part of school system? Is it just a program, you think, or is it like?
Well, I mean, for here in Canada, the reality is, you know, there's a lot of our history that we just don't want to admit to. So we don't teach about it. You know, like you just said, we grew up learning lots of information and history on Indigenous people, but they never told us anything about residential schools.
They never did. I was just thinking that, Tiff.
Never, ever. They would never, ever admit to it. And I mean, the last one closed in 1996.
You know what? As soon as you started talking, I thought, yes, we did learn a lot about like First Nations and tea, and like kind of locally, we learned about it. But I didn't understand the devastation of residential schools until like 15 years later. Really?
Yeah.
And it wasn't. In all fairness, wasn't because I was like,
yeah. And even, you know, like I think I was in grade 10, you were in grade 11 when, you know, Picton was caught and they found all of, you know, everything that he had been doing on the farm. And I mean, that was all, I think, Indigenous women.
Give listeners a background of that story.
Okay, so Robert Picton was a serial killer in the Vancouver area who killed over 3 decades. And him and his brother owned this large farm, like a pig farm, that was known to, you know, have big parties for bikers, and there was girls, and there was, you know, alcohol being sold and consumed and things like that. And they actually, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a woman that escaped and said what was going on out there at this farm, and said who it was and everything. And she wasn't taken seriously because she, you know, was addicted and living on the downtown east side and was of Indigenous descent. And the reality is the police didn't care. So he went on to kill more for a few years before he was finally caught and convicted of what, like 30 different murders, or maybe just a few people. But it was like, you know, they found
that was a long time ago. I can't even remember the details of the story, but what you're saying is, as it turns out, a lot of those women were Nations.
They were Indigenous women. And I mean, one of them, we went to school with one of the women's daughters. You know, they found her mom's remains on his farm, and she was from Camel River. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, you know, Canada needs to embrace. They need to understand that not everything in our history is biased. No, please, not right now.
Done.
We have to understand that, you know, everything that we talk about and how we came to be isn't pretty, and the sooner that we admit it, the better off everybody is. So yeah, I think, you know, as far as like what can the schools do to be more inclusive is, you know, start teaching about everything. Like there was a time when Salt Spring Island,
to start actually educating like on importance. Because I feel like,
and I mean, you can go like location wise as well. Like, you know, we're on Vancouver Island. At one point, Salt Spring Island had quite a few freed slaves from California come up here and try to settle on Salt Spring Island. And they were not met with welcoming arms, and decided that they had to leave eventually because it wasn't going well for them. So we do have history here on the island. You know, our talks about, you know, some of our forefathers for this area being part Black and, you know, things like that. So, you know, there's no reason that we shouldn't just include a bit of everything. And I think for teachers specifically, you know, if you have a child that's in your class that is, you know, a different race than the majority of, you know, your other pupils, ask them some things and then learn about them and then make that part of your curriculum, you know, like I always thought like, oh, it would have been so cool when I was in, you know, so-and-so's class if, you know, we could have learned something about, you know, the Caribbean or, you know, different things that would have been beneficial for me. Like maybe that's selfish, but I mean, I'm also, you know, one that I like, there was never any representation in school for us. You know, we didn't celebrate Martin Luther King Day in Canada. We didn't really celebrate Black History Month. You know, there was never anything about Black Canadians in school. Like we didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, a lot of the kids that we went to school with didn't even know who Malcolm X or Martin Luther King was, or they didn't understand anything that we were talking about, you know. So I think that that's a major problem, and we need to admit that that's a major problem here, and we need to fix it, you know. My daughter, well, this year, beginning of January sometime, they had like a Black Shirt Day, and that was supposed to be in support of, you know, Black Lives Matter and the movement and things like that. My daughter was the only child at school that day that wore a Black t-shirt for that reason. Like nobody else knew.
Oh.
You know, but several weeks later, when the teachers wanted everybody to wear red in support of the teachers, they went for it. So
Wow.
it's definitely not a represented or considered topic in school, and that's a problem because there's kids that are just missing out on representation, and that's not okay. That's not a complete learning program, in my opinion.
No, I agree, and I think there's tons of Black Canadians that I'm starting to learn from doing my own research legislatively to laws, including the fact that, you know, we celebrate in conjunction with the U.S. Black History Month, and that I was instituted. But anyways, we're at 1 hour, Tiff, and so I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for just adding those comments, because I think it's important to sort of leave like some crumbs or some interest when it comes to things better, especially for young people growing up in the province and across Canada. It's not as simple as saying, you know, Happy MLK Day, you know, in January. It's like we've got to be a little bit more in depth, because ultimately what I also believe and what I feel I missed was that when we didn't talk about residential schools, we didn't talk about the racism and the criticism against Indigenous people here, it didn't, I mean, not that I lacked empathy, but it didn't give me credible information. Like, I feel like I don't need to be taught empathy for other people, for Black and brown people, you know, or anybody suffering. I don't need to be taught that. But I do believe that there are, especially young people that come from households in which that information is really critical to creating tolerance and acceptance, when perhaps the adults in the household may not you know, practice that or be so interested in that. So I think, like, in terms of making like new generations of Canadians and Americans and whoever else more informed, that kind of information is really important, especially in the school system. So anyways, thank you for that, and thank you for talking with me. I mean, in such a good environment. I know, at least I have mine are downstairs. So.
Yeah, mine is right in front of me.
Yeah, but thank you so much. I love you. Thank you for being here and having this conversation, and I hope that we can talk about some more stuff soon. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for inviting me, and yeah, I hope it's the start of something really good and important, and we can all benefit from.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, you too. Bye.